And thanks everyone for attending this webinar. We're really excited and thankful for this opportunity put on by NASEO, the National Association of State Energy Officials, as well as the ESC, Energy Services Coalition, for putting on this webinar with the Colorado Energy Office. My name is Dylan Klumhouse. I'm an engineer here at the Colorado Energy Office, and I help manage and implement our program here in the state of Colorado. I'll also introduce my colleague, Jock Tuttle, and give him a chance to let you all know who he is.
Thanks, Dylan. And yeah, just super thankful that NASEO and the ESC are, putting on this webinar today and giving us the opportunity to do some outreach for our EPC program in the state of Colorado. My name's Jock Tuttle. I'm also an engineer working at the Colorado Energy Office on the Energy Performance Contracting Program, offering some of the contract and engineering support that I think we're going to hear a little bit about today. So,
thanks, Jock. And we're really excited to have Dale Haas here with the Energy Services Coalition. He really is one of the experts in energy savings performance contracting in the nation. So really fortunate to have him here talk about our program specific to Colorado. So everything you hear today will be targeted for our clients in Colorado. There's definitely some similarities nationwide. So if you have any questions specific to how other states and these projects go throughout the country, Dale's a great expert on that. We're also really fortunate to have Shannon Oliver with us today, who will provide a case study. He recently went through a project through our program in Colorado. He's from Adams 12 five-star schools, and we're really excited to have him share what his experience has been going through our program. I'll hand it back over to Sam now to get everything kicked off. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Dylan. And again, welcome everybody to this training. We're really looking forward to having you all here to listen and learn from Dale as he provides a lot of good information on the basics around Colorado's energy performance contracting program. My name is Sam Kramer. I'm NASEO's Financing and Planning and Program Director. For those of you who don't know, NASEO stands for the National Association of State Energy Officials. So we are the national organization representing not only the Colorado Energy Office, but there are 55 other counterparts throughout the country with the states and territories. We have been working with the Energy Savings Coalition, Energy Services Coalition, excuse me, for a number of years on energy savings performance contracting, because we believe that performance contracting offers a viable path forward for states to assist public building owners with making needed improvements to their facilities that will not only improve and extend the life of the building, but also save energy and help the environment as well. So I'd like to turn things over without further ado to Dale Haas. He presently serves as the technical assistance provider for the Energy Services Coalition State Technical Liaison Team, which is supported by a cooperative agreement with the United States Department of Energy. Aside from his active role with ESC, he continues to support the continuous improvement of the nation's compendium of best practices, tools, resources, instruments, and guides around energy performance contracting, including providing assistance to many states, just like Colorado. Prior to this role, he was a member of the leadership team of UNESCO for over a decade, and he's been engaged in energy efficiency, providing client solutions for over 30 years. So if you have any question about performance contracting, Dale is going to be your go-to guy. I'd like to turn things over now to Dale to get us going with the training. Dale, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Sam. It's really a pleasure to be joining you all today. We've got some slides here that really are going to help us walk through the fundamentals of guaranteed energy savings performance contracting, speaking in generalities, but then customizing a bit for you folks in Colorado. Certainly glad to be joining you and excited about the opportunity to move forward with this presentation. So, who is the Energy Services Coalition? Most of you probably know in Colorado, but ESC, it's kind of the organizations, not companies, not really states or agencies, but the group of individuals that come together to promote the benefits of guaranteed energy savings performance contracting. For years, I've shared with people, it's not really that you're promoting performance contracting, it's that you're promoting the benefits that can come from this vehicle. That's what's important. You know, one of the real strengths of the Energy Services Coalition is its local chapters. And I'm proud to tell you that I personally have had the opportunity, I believe on 3 different occasions, to travel to Colorado and join the chapter there, as well as, of course, participate in the national event that was held there just a couple of years ago. It's when those chapters sit together and meet and talk about hurdles and challenges, bottlenecks in programs, what can be done to improve, and join together for outreach and education, that really the power of the Energy Services Coalition comes into fruition. So we always like to start with a bit of a definition. This one actually is from 1998. That seems like a really long time ago now, but that definition was one that I latched onto early and I still carry around with me. Use of guaranteed savings to modernize your facilities and systems over a specified period of time. Of course, you know, look at that and hear those words. Let's talk about a couple of other definitions. You know, it could be a paid for by savings project. It could be cash neutral construction. There's a lot of definitions like that. But to be clear, and you can see it right there in front of you, these are dollars that you're going to spend. You're either going to send them to your utility companies based on your inefficiencies, or you can leverage them to modernize your existing investments. Wow. What a huge concept to bring forward. Now, for years, we've talked about the need to modernize facilities, fix stuff, get stuff done with dollars you don't have. But it's becoming ever important that we all pay attention to the green side of performance contracting, not dollars, but in fact, our environmental stewardship, as well as economic development, creating jobs. So here's a couple of other definitions just for you to think about. Repurposing utility dollars to fix stuff. I mean, that's where this all starts. Or a legislatively empowered budget neutral means of procurement, or my personal favorite because, well, I wrote it, a debt-free modernization of public facilities, and forward with what it says there. You know, the point behind debt-free, most credit institutions and lending institutions see these transactions as debt. In some states, they've recognized that not only are you borrowing money, but you're rather producing an avoidance of a known cost. And it's that net neutral transaction that we try to help people recognize. Money out, money in, net neutral. So does that leave any unanswered questions? Well, sure, it probably does. You know, is performance contracting a means of finance? Well, it is, in that it's a way to repay an upfront financial commitment. Do the ESCOs bring you the money today? No, they don't. In fact, in your state and in every other these days, some other financial institution, some lending authority needs to bring forward an instrument that finances the project or provides the upfront capital, typically that goes into an escrow account, and then you pull it out and pay the bills as work gets done. So is it a finance mechanism? Well, sure, it leverages a finance mechanism. Is it a means of competitive procurement? You know, I'm quite familiar with the processes in Colorado, and I tell you that the answer to that is yes. The pre-qualified ESCOs on the Colorado Energy Office list actually compete by markups. You know, nobody really knows what your project's going to look like, what the entire scope would be of the services that could be performed. So to have a competitive procurement, it looks like, hey, tell me what % you're going to charge me for design, or what % you're going to charge me for project management, and so on. That's what's competed. And it's important that you know that, because your institution's procurement officials may say, hey, look, we have to have a competitive procurement. That explains how it's done. Are the projects bid? Well, no, there's no defined scope of work. Now, when I say that, sometimes people say, well, you know, the subcontractors might be bid as the ESCO defines the scope, or there may be a bid that goes out for lighting or for chillers or boilers. Well, that's true, but the whole of the project, in other words, the ESCO themselves, is not typically bid, but secured through the competitive procurement that I mentioned earlier. Is it a means of contracting? Well, this is clearly important. You know, all of you on the call today have likely been through traditional construction. You have an architect who thinks about design. You have engineers who think about pragmatic solutions. And then you develop a scope of services that goes out to the street, and the bidding community, the competitive contractors all provide prices for goods and services to meet that specification. Well, that's when the hard part starts. Then you pick somebody and, well, their scope looks a little bit different than the other guys, and maybe they didn't really understand the specification. And you know what? They found a few errors in the specification they'd like to point out, and maybe that leads to something that we cringe when we say change orders. But in performance contracting, it is a single source provider for the design, the implementation, and in fact, the performance. You know, the ESCOs are assuring you that the projects will do what they say they were going to do, including they will avoid the costs or accrue the savings as guaranteed. Now, there are a lot of other products in the marketplace today, and maybe somebody's knocked on your door and they've mentioned one of these other names, and there are a host of them there. Well, we're going to be talking about performance contracting, but I did assemble just a few thoughts for you to consider when somebody knocks on your door and begins to ask you questions about these so-called new products. Well, for most of you, you're a public sector institution, and you need to know that there is a statute enabling legislation defining the transaction. Now, I know, and of course, Colorado Energy Office knows and can cite the statute in Colorado that empowers you to use performance contracting. Some of these other methodologies, well, maybe not so much. So that's an important thing to know. Separately, enabling legislation for performance contracting really tees up this concept of competitive procurement by markups. So what means of public procurement is going to be required for some of these other models? And then there's a few other ideas here, like who's going to own the improvement? Now, again, if you're a state or local unit of government and you enter into something called a tax exempt lease purchase or municipal lease, lots of different names around that, there's a really good chance based on your legislation that when devices and systems are installed in your facilities, you take ownership. You actually own them. And there may or may not be a security interest required to support those finances that are provided. It's important to understand how that works in these other models. Who owns the risk? You know, is the upfront financing debt? Whose process do you follow? And ultimately, whose contract should you use? Now, I know I'm here to tell you unequivocally, there is a set of contract instruments provided by the Colorado Energy Office for you to use for performance contracting. For these other models, well, you should think that through. What if I needed to terminate them? You know, where do I get a copy of a contract? Who should legally review it? And so on and so forth. So let's switch gears. Let's switch back to why we're here and talk about performance contracting. So the question really becomes, why do this anyway? Well, you know, the simple fact is for most people, they have a lot of things on their to-do list. Deferred maintenance. I've often chided people about that. Do you have a deferred maintenance list? Yes, we do. Well, how do you have one? Well, what do you mean? Well, if you had all the money that you needed to do all the stuff you needed to do, wouldn't you have attended to those maintenance items and not deferred them until another budget year? So if you find yourself thinking about your deferred maintenance list, well, we might point to the fact that you might have money, but maybe not enough to do all that you'd like to do. Maybe you have energy goals these days. Maybe you have green environmental stewardship goals that you're trying to attain. But, you know, you got those goals. You didn't necessarily get a blank checkbook to help you reach those goals. And now you may be scratching your head going, how do I really ensure that I'm reducing my carbon consumption? Well, that is a challenge. Maybe it's environmental targets that you have, or job creation. Maybe you need your local contractors and subcontractors at work. Maybe, as mentioned before, you just have some system infrastructure, some devices that, well, according to the maintenance team, they just keep failing over and over. And no matter how many times they try to replace some parts, parts are becoming hard to come by. You know, we've used all the baling wire that we had in the back room. Now we've resorted to duct tape, and we just can't keep this stuff working. Well, another good reason. And maybe there's a need for resilience. Maybe natural disasters have caused us to recognize the need to bounce back and to get our systems back up to speed, and recognizing how we leverage energy efficiency to provide for that resilience makes good sense. And let's just make one statement here. Let's presume that there's not enough money in your performance contract from the savings that you're going to achieve to get that microgrid in place that you really want. Why would you even consider installing a microgrid to support your facilities if they weren't as efficient as they could be already? Then ultimately leveraging these dollars, leveraging the energy savings for the maximum investment, the maximum value for you to continue the investment into your public institutions. You know, we've always really stood behind this standing presumption that if you do have all the money in all the time and you've got all the expertise that you need in-house, well, just do the work that way. Sometimes I've talked to people who said, you know, I really had no idea that I was going to just have the one ESCO to interface with. They managed the study to understand the design. They managed the subcontractors, understood how to procure. I really had one meeting to go to, one person that was my point of contact, and all this work got done, saving me the traditional team of people that I would need to have oversee this work. Another great solution provided by performance contracting. Okay, well, in the earliest principles, the way this started out 25, 30 years ago, actually more, but people were really in this situation where they needed a bunch of stuff replaced, but they just didn't have the money, time, or expertise to do it. And that sort of met up with a whole group of people who said, you know, I have just what you need. I know it works. Well, but as an end user, as an institution, maybe you didn't have enough confidence that it would deliver the predicted results to buy it. So imagine yourself, tomorrow you decide to go buy a new car. You go to the car lot and they say, hey, look, this is a new hybrid car. It gets 80 miles per gallon. Based on your driving history, this car will pay for itself in 3 years. If you believe that, you might move forward. Wouldn't it be great if they provide a guarantee? Wouldn't it be great if that transaction looked like performance contracting? Well, back to the earliest days, the ESCOs bought the stuff, installed it. You paid them back only when the savings were realized. Well, it was sort of the perfect model. The ESCOs didn't get paid until the savings is achieved and proven. It was the ultimate guarantee that the project had performed as intended. No liens, no loans, no debt, virtually no risk. To be clear, that concept has expired. That model exists no more. On the other hand, it was replaced with the concept of, okay, we know how to utilize the Colorado Energy Office tools to use an RFP and select an ESCO. We understand the implementation, but this later solution that came along was all about the financing piece that said, well, how do we do that? If the ESCO is not going to buy all the stuff, then I'm going to need a third-party financier. Maybe it's a bond if you're a state agency. Maybe as an institution, it could be a GO bond. Honestly, it could be a loan, a lease. Tax-exempt lease purchasing is probably the most popular way. But still, that third-party financier needs to come to the table. And there will be a cost for those the cost of money to borrow the money until it's paid back. It does require a separate finance solution or agreement. Typically, they're inked at the same time as an implementation contract, just thinking in advance. It's those two instruments coming together at the same time that really solidifies your actions forward in a performance contract. As a reminder here, in a tax-exempt lease purchase, the public entity continues to hold title to the goods and services. And as I've noted here, there may or may not be a security interest or lien. Most of us as consumers are looking for the least expensive cost of money for the highest value project. So you may go to a leasing provider and say, well, what I'm after here is the least costly tax-exempt lease purchase. They will, in fact, then suggest for you that they will need a security interest or a lien on the goods and services installed, or maybe even on the facilities that you're in. If, on the other hand, you ask them for an unsecured note, some will provide it at a higher rate, maybe some others won't. But that is the formula of the later solution. Therefore, it kind of became the proof or evidence of the savings. Virtually the teeth of the guarantee was moved to this concept that we call measurement and verification. Not stipulated, not we think you're going to get it, but prove to me scientifically, go measure something, show me an indication that these savings have been achieved, and that supports this concept of a guarantee. Now, I offer this warning. I hope it's very clear. Beware of this pretext. I hear it a lot in the world today. You know, there's not really a point for M&V. These things always change in our facilities. And so, you know, it doesn't really make any sense. Now, Dylan and Jock could best support this, but I believe that you are required to have 3 years of measurement and verification in Colorado. But I want you to know this too. Your institution could have M&V far longer into the performance period of your project. And the point is to recognize that the very science of measurement and verification would allow the work to be done to illustrate, hey, I'm adding 20 more students in my community college. What impact will that have on my savings? Math, engineering assumptions can deliver those changes for you. There was a new wrinkle that came along in July 21 of 2010. Seems like not a lot of folks heard about it, so we're careful here to share it. And in this Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, which applies to all state and local units of government, it's fundamentally interpreted as a restriction that the ESCOs cannot make recommendations about who should be your financier or even the best means for you to finance a project. The Securities and Exchange Commission says that that needs to be a registered municipal advisor. Still, a third-party financier is always necessary, and there is this continued press toward the least costly rate, as evidenced by the example I shared with you earlier. Lowest rate, probably a securitized transaction. So some other principles to think about. Number one, performance contracting is not two enemies working together for the same project goal. It's two partners. They really perform best when it's a partnership between the owner and the ESCO trying to achieve the same goals. I need you to fix this stuff. Make me more efficient. Sure, I'll do my part. I'll try to make sure that if we change our operating schedules, we set them back. In other words, if we put our controls in override, we'll put them back as quickly as we can into their automated operating environment. If we're going to add more people, we'll reach out to our partner and tell them. If we're going to take a classroom and turn it into a computer lab, let's tell the ESCO. Let's plan in advance for what that impact will look like, so together we can understand its impact and how we'll continue to pay for the project by savings. All of the work of the project should meet or exceed the standards of the owner. You know, don't fall back on your primary mission to allow efficiency to occur. In other words, imagine how easy it would be for me. I could be your ESCO. I would come in and say, I got it. We can probably save about 22% of all your electrical consumption. We're going to turn off all the lights and leave them off. Just have everybody bring flashlights or headlamps. It'll be fine. Well, of course, that makes no sense. It makes no more sense to do that than it does for you to be too cold in a working environment or too hot in a working environment. there should be a set of standards, a bracket of comfort, lighting levels, temperature and humidity, et cetera, that should be agreed to, and the project should fulfill it. Now, I always talk a little bit about this, not at the set point of a thermostat, but in the space conditions. If you want to make sure that Mary's happy since she's been too cold and too hot in the past, it really doesn't have anything to do with the set point of a system. That's for engineers to worry about. They'll need to do that math. What you want to know is that they can set it at a temperature so that the space condition can be between the 74 and 76 degrees that you specified. These things are typically known as standards of comfort. Don't sacrifice them for efficiency. And then important to recognize the savings achieved must each and every year pay for the costs for that year. In most programs around the nation today, virtually all, there's no such thing as harvesting savings from this year and passing them to the next year to cover a potential shortfall. It's just not the way it works. And frankly, if you're a public institution, and there's a really good chance that you are, your budgets don't work that way anyhow. Nobody ever gave you a savings account to carry money from one year to the next. Other important considerations, you know what? I offered you some definitions, but if you want to know what defines performance contracting in Colorado, look to the Colorado enabling legislation. And as a part of this project, you'll want to ensure that it's followed. The language within the information provided by the ESCO in something called the InvestmentGrade Audit, or the proposal, or the Guaranteed Energy Savings Performance Contract, or EPC that you may call it, in all the schedules, all the appendices, all the exhibits, it cannot conflict or supersede your enabling statute. And that's important to reinforce because from time to time, people put in language that, well, you just really have to sort through later. It's now a good time to recognize that nothing should come to you that conflicts or attempts to supersede your statute. Once in a while I read things and it's not so uncommon, and it would say, hey, look, first thing you need to do if you're thinking about doing this is determine a champion. And the second thing you need to do is hire an ESCO and just get started. And to that, I'd say you're making a grave error. I would tell you to look at all the people on this list and recognize that, well, you may be a champion, and I'm certain that you're going to need one as a point of contact. And then certainly your next step in Colorado is to reach out to the Colorado Energy Office, talk to Dylan and Jock and team. But then you should think about all these other people that need to be educated and informed about what you're planning to do. Legal, is it legal? Here's the statute. Maybe you have a legal supervising authority. Make sure before you get started that they're comfortable with what you're about to do. Waiting until the last second to show them something that they may need to sign off on is a huge mistake. The finance team needs to be aware what you're thinking about doing. You're planning on being so much more efficient that your utility bills will get lower and lower. And when they do, you're going to use that money that was avoided, the reduced cost of your utility bill, and it needs to be applied to repay the upfront financing. Your finance people need to commit to full-term budgeting. In other words, if today you're getting $100 for your operation and maintenance budget, which includes your utilities, and you're entering into a contract for 16, 17, 18, 20 years, you need to know that that $100 is still going to be there so that part of it can be saved, if you will, avoided as a cost, and that same amount or more of it become available so that you can repay this note. You need your procurement team to recognize how things are going to be purchased. And frankly, talk to them. They may step up quickly and say, you know, we've standardized on brand X and we have full justification for that. We can help you particularly specify that brand for your project. The maintenance people, well, they know where the bones are buried. They know where stuff's held together with a coat hanger and it just might be falling apart. They know how hard it is to find replacement parts for some of those aging devices that just keep limping along. Wow, they would be able to provide a complete list of where the complaints come from virtually all parts of your facilities and systems. Then there's the construction team. Ultimately, people tell me construction teams generally say, we're going to inherit these buildings back from an oversight standpoint. We need to ensure that these facilities have upgrades that meet or exceed our day-to-day standards. Boy, do I agree. You should have them engaged up front. Oversight becoming more and more common, and frankly, you are fundamentally blessed with the fact that the Colorado Energy Office extends this team to help you look at your projects and make sure that they make sense. Regardless of who your supervising authorities are, anybody that's going to need to sign off on this project, you should help educate up front. You should get some sort of commitment. Yes, we understand what you're going to try to pursue. We know that unless you can find a project that pays for itself, you're not moving forward. And if you find that project, you're going to bring it back to us. That would be great. Ultimately, I can help you understand it this way. Any approving authority, any supervising authority that has the ability to say no after you've started this process is someone you should engage to help them understand what you're attempting to accomplish with your performance contracting project. So, whose paper should I use? Well, I get that asked of me a lot in states all across the nation. In Colorado, it is so simple. You have a set of pre-vetted, been reviewed, been used, been modified to ensure that they can be as successful as possible, ready and available for you and your project at the Colorado Energy Office. What a powerful tool. No need to think about anyone saying, well, let's consider using my instruments. We don't need to use anyone else's. I would tell you, use those in the Colorado Energy Office. Okay, we finally got to a point where we've tackled some knowledge. We've got some fundamental education. We've assembled this team of people that's a little educated. What do I need to do to get ready? Well, first things first, just be prepared to assemble 36 months of, and this slide should be modified to say normal utility bills. Was last year normal? Maybe not for you. Maybe you evacuated some of your spaces wholly or partially for some or all of the year. Well, then the utility bill is not a normal utility bill. You can't use it and say, hey, I want to look at 3 years of normal utilities to find average consumption. You had an abnormal year. There's nothing normal about that. So you should be thinking about how you find those 36 months of utility bills for each and all utilities. Not some of them, but all of them. Now, why 3 years? Well, you could get 2 years, but what if there's a disparity? What if one's really high and one's really low? How would you get to the bottom of what's a normal bill? That's why 3, so that you can look at oddities or excursions that might make things look a little bit different. All utilities, yep, that's all of them. Electricity, gas, propane, heating oil, heating fuel, if you will, water, sewer, steam, anything that you're paying for, they need to be assembled. They may, in fact, be impacted by the project. Now, before you go off to the storage facility to find these banker's boxes of bills, well, I always encourage you, reach out to Excel or your serving utilities and see if they have spreadsheets that you can look at. Now, you're going to want a sample of each bill for each year. And that's so that you and the ESCO can look closely at how you are billed, how the tariff, it's typically called, is established, whether there are taxes and riders and the kind of things that can't be solved by efficiency. Now, you may have noticed this little flag just came up in the upper left-hand corner that says, for more insights, I'd call it maybe even for a deeper dive, be sure to check out lesson 110 of GESPCU. Well, that is the Guaranteed Energy Savings Performance Contracting University. It's something that we were sponsored at ESC to provide by the United States Department of Energy that really turned into looking like 25 lessons that are 15, 20 minutes of listening, or you can read the script and walk right through performance contracting from beginning to end. Now, it won't be Colorado specific, but I can assure you that it will give you a foundation of knowledge like you've never imagined before. Quite a small investment to make. Then you want to reach out to CEO and make sure that you understand the difference between those generalities and what's specific to your state. Okay, back on utility bills. You know, some utility bills may have demand charges, riders, taxes, things that can't be impacted by efficiency. You need to understand that. You need to know it so well that you could construct a multi-million-dollar project on the back of your knowledge of efficiency and how it's gauged on those bills. Now, that won't be the way that a guarantee is provided to you, most likely, but it certainly is something you need to understand. If, in fact, the ESCO can prove through M&V that you've saved 20% of your planned consumption, and you look at the bill and the bill hasn't gone down 20%, maybe it is because of demand charges or riders or taxes or things that could not have been impacted. Better to know that early. Okay, then there's this technical facility profile that you can prepare in advance. That really ends up looking like a list of everything. Building square footages, construction data, who's in the buildings, when they're in it, when it operates, drawings, past plans, if you will, studies, engineer logs, anything you can get your hands on, complaint lists, lists of things you wished you could accomplish, and of course, prior energy audits, and on and on and on. These things are typically listed and are in your investment grade audit agreement. It's really important that you get as much of that background information, begin to think about where you can find it early in the project cycle. Additionally, you know, there's this concept of picking partners. I might want an owner's rep. Well, you have one built in. You have the team at the Colorado Energy Office who's there to help you understand. Reach out to them early. They can help you understand the process, guide you from doing things that may have been a waste of time later. But in the end, you're going to have to figure out how to, well, pick energy services company from that group of pre-qualified providers. The Energy Office has done this fabulous job already of finding for you, as I recall, 13 providers that have proven themselves capable of fulfilling the roles and obligations of the Colorado statute and program. Among those 13, you simply need to decide which one fits you best. You might look at their history on paper, you might have oral interviews and talk to them. That's a good idea. Ask them the hard questions that you want to know about. And I always encourage this. You really don't want to talk to the marketing team or the senior executives near as much as you want to talk to the people that are going to be in your space and doing work for you. Find out how they think. Find out if they're planning on interrupting your work or helping you continue your primary mission. You know, we sort of label here on the last bullet the comfort factor. You might be working with these people for 3, 10, 15, 20 years. You need to make sure that the people that you're going to work with, the people that you're going to partner with, are people that you could be comfortable with. Kind of people that you want to let in your facility and say, hey, I got some problems. I'm going to count on you to help me fix them. Then there's a need to find a financing partner. How do you find them? Well, Dale, it's probably just the person with the lowest rate. You know what? In my many decades of history in this industry, that's not necessarily true. There are some really bright finance people that understand how to tailor when money's available for you, how to make particular flexibility for things like incorporating incentives and grants that maybe you can't do with a different finance structure. Wow. You need to understand those scenarios. What sort of security do they require? What if I decide to pay this off early? Can I? Will there be a penalty? Lots to consider. When do you bring them on? Again, early, make them part of the team. They can help you think about how to structure the right financial instrument for your project. Then let's talk a little bit about investment grade audits. Well, again, the paper is there for you in the Colorado Energy Office, and it goes through all of these sorts of technical considerations. Is this a study or a proposal? Well, I'm here to tell you it's a study. It's an engineering exercise to identify all the loads that you consume from a utility perspective and what variables impact them. I mean, that's a really good summary. And in Colorado, like in every other state, you should be planning on paying for this engineering study. Nobody pays for a proposal. The proposal comes out of the study. So when the procurement folks ask you, wait a minute, it looks like we're paying for a proposal. No, you're not. You're paying for a study. From that study, you'll be presented a proposal. Clearly important. And then there's, how is your new partner going to write this study? Well, it is going to be full of all sorts of engineering calculations and assumptions that should be displayed for you so that any third party could pick them up and repeat those calculations. But here's a hint. Don't satisfy just for that. I've come to say, make sure that the ESCO spends the time to make your reports readable for a third grade math teacher. In other words, explain it in layman's terms. I'm going to ask somebody really smart that has authority to read this thing and sign it. Shouldn't they be able to understand it? I can tell you, my eyes too glaze over when I look at 3 pages of deep calculations about how to determine what the energy efficiency is going to be in the event the weather changes. Wow, it's enough to make you crazy. Tell me what this means so that I can understand it. Then there's this concept of a baseline. Baseline of what? Is it going to be a baseline of the lighting fixtures, or it's going to be a baseline of all the measures aggregated into a facility baseline, reconciled to my utility bill so that I can see the reasonableness of what's being proposed to me? Wow, all important stuff. Once again, we thought the IGA was so important for you that we set aside 5 separate lessons in GESPCU. Worth the listen, I can assure you. Okay, other things. Well, in the IGA, there's the definition of each measure. Where does it start and stop? I saw a project that I like to explain this story so that you can think about scope of a measure. Steam traps are going to be replaced. If you're using steam, you understand their need to be replaced over time. Well, the efficiency of a steam trap comes from the steam trap. It doesn't come from valves and strainers and separately any adjoining pipe. So I saw a project one time that literally had the efficiency of the steam trap incorporated into the IGA. They left the cost of valve strainers and piping to the owner to be supplied separately. Can you imagine what that means to you? Now you're trying to figure out, is this really paying for my project? Are you asking me to come up with so much capital to support it that I'm not sure I even fit the enabling legislation? Make sure that you understand the start-stop of every measure. Lots of different pieces and parts there, all incorporated within this design study instrument that we call the investment grade audit. It also includes a proposal that would identify the measures finally included. You may, as an owner working with your ESCO, decide that some measures were studied, but they just dropped out. They just didn't seem to fit the project any longer. The proposal should eliminate those and illustrate only those measures included. It should have a construction plan. And by the way, when measures are going to be installed. No point in having your windows replaced in the dead of winter. It can be quite a challenge to maintain comfort in a space. You should have a commissioning plan, an M&V plan, and understand its options and term and pricing. Who holds the risk for your project? All of this stuff incorporated in the investment grade audit. Ultimately, the guaranteed savings will be defined. And then there's things like a safety or diversity factor. Well, just a brief point there. If I had a 100-watt incandescent light bulb in the janitor's closet that I was going to replace with 11-watt LED, I would expect to save 89 watts every hour that the light was being burned. Maybe, so that we don't end up fighting over pennies, maybe instead of me guaranteeing those 89 watts, I'll guarantee 85 watts. And then if there's any depreciation over time, we don't get into a big squabble about that. That would represent a diversity or safety factor. Good to understand the difference between how safety factors are applied between the 13 ESCOs in Colorado. And then there's pricing. Wow. One thing that I've heard for the last 30 years is, I don't know if I'm really going to use performance contracting. I don't trust the pricing. To that I say, well, if you don't trust it, frankly, it's your fault. I'd be asking for 100% transparency. Show me what you're paying for that, and I'll tell you what I will pay for it. Show me what your markup needs to be on that after you buy it, and then I'll pay for that. Show me how many hours you're going to be involved in this study, or how many hours it takes you to do measurement and verification. Help me understand how many hours at what rate, and then I'll know that I have value. Frankly, help me understand that the price I pay for my new 300-ton chiller includes design, planning, pipe, valves, electrical disconnect, and the chiller. Oh, and by the way, eliminating the old one, changing the housekeeping pad, all of it may fall under the one measure price. Until you understand pricing at that level, you can't support the great value that performance contracting provides. Most projects, you're looking at a guaranteed maximum price supported by the fact that the energy savings must pay for the project. In the event you're quoted a price, maybe it was 3 years ago for an LED lighting fixture, and the lighting fixture was $100. Before you actually acquire it, it's down to $70. Who should see that savings? Well, in the 100% transparency model, you would. Be a great steward of public funds. Ensure you get great value. Assessing reasonability, the folks at the Colorado Energy Office can help you with that, but it is about transparency of pricing and, in fact, seeing the full scope of each measure. Then you should receive a cash flow pro forma. That would be an instrument that illustrates that the project does, in fact, pay for itself each year of the project. And finally, there's an ESPC agreement, EPC agreement. It incorporates the IGA in whole, provides standard terms and conditions, and for you local units of government in Colorado, it even gives you the option to incorporate your own, provides an order of precedence. All the functions of a typical construction contract are included there for you. Please take advantage of them. Also includes things like when you should be invoiced, construction guidance, what is required for permits and management of hazardous wastes, and so on and so forth. Now, we simply show you all these different lists of items to give you the confidence that it's all been considered with performance contracting. This is not new age stuff. It's been done over and over again, and these instruments come to you with all these considerations. In Colorado, the EPC documents look just like this. I've listed them for you so that you can have them in these set of slides. You certainly can reach out to the Colorado Energy Office and find them on the website. All these individual schedules, all provided for you. Please follow this pre-constructed paper. It is the pre-vetted way for you to help ensure your success. Finally, even the schedules that aren't provided as templates, but the Colorado Energy Office is glad to walk you through what needs to be in each of these separate schedules in your EPC agreement. Finally, there's this fundamental review of implementation. What do you need? Well, you're going to need submittals, notice to proceed, Gantt chart. All this stuff is provided for your consideration. Whose process is it? Well, it's your process. Follow it. It will guide you to success. Finally, there's post-construction services, which may be completely different for you. I mean, let's face it, in traditional construction, what's happened is you get all the work done, you pay all the invoices, and then the warranty starts. And in 366 days, well, you're sort of on your own. With a performance contract, that's not true. And so you'll need to be comfortable with what is a material change. Well, I'm going to, in fact, change that classroom to a computer lab. That's a material change. I'm going to shut down this wing of my building. That's a material change, I can assure you. Working with your partner, you would want to report those, share that information so that both partners are on the same page. Where do I get warranty support for these devices? How long does it last? Who do I call? All the kinds of considerations that you want to know about these new devices that have been installed. And then there's annual measurement and verification reports. What do I want to see there? I want to see a report written so cleanly that an engineer can find the savings, and so plainly that my supervising authorities can say, I read it, I understand it. This project's doing exactly what we set out for it to do. That's a win. Then finally, on this slide, you see me suggesting that you see those M&V reports reconciled to the utility bills. Now, this is not saying that your guarantee is predicated on the utility bills, but what you as an owner know how to look at is your utility bill goes up, goes down. Have your ESCO invite them to show you how to see your measured and verified savings and how they are reconciled to your utility bill to help you with the support you want to ensure that your project has been a success. Recapping the steps, learn a lot first. Doesn't take that long. Get a little background knowledge, understand where the process and paperwork comes from, then reach out to CEO. Follow the investment grade audit to the letter. Don't skip steps. I often hear people say, well, your project really doesn't need this part. Really? If somebody tells you that, reach out to Dylan and Jock and ask them, is that true, or should we in fact complete those steps? Then there's the EPC contract. Understand the rules, your rights. Further, your responsibilities. If you want to do maintenance on your measures, and likely you do, what does that mean? What if you miss performing the maintenance? What if the savings begins to slip because you couldn't pay enough attention to the maintenance list that was provided for you? Understand that before you start. It's the best time to know everything about your project. Implementation, well, it should meet or exceed every existing norm in your facility. And then understand this concept, this measurement and verification thing. Again, Colorado Energy Office can help you. They're your reliable asset. Measurement and verification, you can't really go to school about it. GESPCU offers a little thought there, but it's a little different. Make sure that you've engaged the team to help you. Collect and maintain data. You know what? When you get finished with this project and you get 5 years down the road, you, like most others, are going to say, hey, I really wish I had all the meeting minutes collected from the time that we were working through this project with the ESCO. Where is that commissioning plan? Hey, have you got a copy of the contract? Well, do you know where the commissioning forms are with the sign-offs? I'm not sure this is working out the way we thought it would. Who's got the pre-construction pictures that were taken when we did this work? Because I'm being asked why we did it anyway. Where do I get that stuff? And I'm going to tell you, well, the idea here is to answer the question, what do you save? I encourage you, save it all. The spreadsheets for load calculations, the meeting minutes, all of it. The emails that go back and forth can have decisions embedded in them. Wow, it is incredibly important that you have this stuff. Well, you can save it on your laptop. You can save it in a central system. You can save it in a paper file cabinet, if you can figure out where to find that in 12 years. Or you can save it in this concept of EProject Builder, EProject Express. Now, I am always respectfully going to defer to the fact that the state's got this wonderful data maintenance system in Colorado. However, you may elect to use EProject Builder to consolidate all of these files, reports into a single place along with the salient information about your project. You see that EProject Express is labeled as new. It actually will be launched tomorrow and rolled out by webinar on July the 13th. So new, you bet, very. Gosh, Dale, this sounds really hard. Why would I do this? Well, consider this. $7 billion worth of this work is done every year, year in and year out in these United States. The average size of the projects reported to Lawrence Berkeley National Labs is about 4.5 million. That means that there are about 30 projects done in every state every year. Now, I can tell you for sure that there are some states that are not doing 30 projects every year. Maybe your state's doing more. There's a list of local units of government that have used performance contracting on the Colorado Energy Office website. Your peers have done this. It makes sense to consider. There's nearly 50 years of history. It's not the first rodeo for this concept. The national model instruments, well, they are available, but you're going to look to the Colorado Energy Office documents, well vetted, tried and true. And just so that you know, we have the utmost of respect in the circles that I run in for the Colorado model. It was one of the foundation models that the nation's central repository of model instruments was built from. There is a veritable army of these experts capable to come help you. 13 are pre-qualified in Colorado, ready, able, and willing to come help you walk through the process of learning about how to do this and implementing it. And a burgeoning industry of third-party owners reps. Not only might you want to have help from the Colorado Energy Office, but some of you might really want to engage a third-party owner's rep, sort of the belt and suspenders of how do I make sure that this works optimally for me and my institution, city or county? Well, there are those folks, and we are fast working on a way to certify them nationally. Does that answer all the questions? Well, I generally hear these kind of questions. How long will this whole process take? To which I could answer, how big is a ball of string? However, I'd say, depends on how many facilities are engaged. Dylan and Jock can share with you the traditional time frame in Colorado better than I can, but it's not uncommon to have 6-8 months of an IGA and then maybe a year of implementation. And from that point forward, you'd be in the post-construction phase. When will I start seeing the savings? Well, after the devices and systems are installed. How will this impact my day-to-day mission? We live and work in these spaces is important. Make sure that the partner that you choose has respect for that primary mission and can help you avoid interruption. Sounds like I'm going to lose control of this process. It's so complex. You should not. You should know that you have the ability to weigh in on manufacturers that are going to be used, subcontractors are going to be used, decisions are going to be made. It is ultimately and in fact your project. Will I still be able to make the kind of changes that we've made over the last 30 years in these spaces? Well, of course you can. Literally, the science of M&V accomplishes that. Now, we've amassed here for you some general resources about performance contracting and some very state-specific ones here on this slide. And we want you to know that that will be distributed for you in these slides as well as in a separate resource list, trying to be as helpful for you as possible. You know, I am convinced that success awaits you just around the corner. If your goals are about environmental stewardship or creating jobs or eliminating that deferred maintenance list, or just getting stuff done, success through performance contracting is in fact just around the corner. Thank you for spending a little bit of your time with me today. I'm going to pass the the webinar back to Sam at this time. Sam, coming your way.
All right, thanks so much, Dale. That was a really informative presentation. Really appreciate that. I'd like to turn things back over to Colorado Energy Office and Dylan to introduce our next speaker, Shannon Oliver.
Great, thanks, Sam. So really excited to have Shannon Oliver speak next. He's the Energy and Sustainability Manager for Adams 12 5-star schools, as well as the EPC Project Champion. Recently went through our program, and we'll share what that experience looked like. And then after that, we'll have some time for Q&A. I did see one question in the chat, which I accidentally dismissed as already being answered, but just want to let you know I will come back to that later after Shannon's presentation. Thanks, Shannon. Feel free to go ahead and kick it off.
Awesome. You guys got my slides up on the screen there. Right, looking good. Thanks, everyone. Well, that was a great introduction. Really thorough overview of energy savings performance contracting by Dale. So thanks for that. Happy to jump right into the case study for our school district EPC project. And just a quick note, we tend to use the parlance of just EPC. I'm an energy manager. I'm all about efficiency. So I'm just dropping one word there, but they mean the same thing. So just a little way of background. Adams 12 5-star schools is a school district in the north metro suburbs of Denver, Colorado. We're about 38,000 students and 4,700 employees. We serve 5 municipalities and 2 counties. We've got about 53 schools, 5.5 million square foot of space, and I manage a $7.5 million annual utilities budget, which includes electricity, gas, water, and waste. Our team is comprised of my supervisor, the maintenance and operations director, myself as the manager of energy and sustainability. Ed Jolly is our energy engineer, which is our controls guy, HVAC controls guy. And then Brett Lynch is a water resource specialist, which is kind of like an irrigation controls guy. We've got a lot more information out on our website with some sustainability plans and reports if anyone is interested. So jumping into the EPC project, our goals when we first started talking about this were to obviously make some facility improvements. And certainly LED was top of the list. That's sort of the linchpin of savings in today's energy market for many of these projects. We also wanted to install some smart energy meters. We use these for tracking our buildings as well as engaging our students. We were hoping for possibly some exterior water efficiency upgrades. Our water rates are going up rapidly, and most of our water does go out on our landscapes. Solar PV is another kind of linchpin of these savings, so we definitely wanted to throw some of that in there. Have some pretty significant HVAC controls needs that we were looking at. And we did know from the onset we wanted about a $1 to $2 million project and really wanted to keep it under a 15-year payback. And those are a couple things, to think about if you're trying to endeavor down this road is what sort of order of magnitude you're willing to play with, and whether or not you have that kind of time frame or desired time frame for payback, as those can really help drive the conversation once you kind of get in the room with an ESCO. So the path for us has been a little bit long. We started these conversations internally back in 2017, talking with the Colorado Energy Office and some other districts that were working in the space, trying to pitch it to our folks internally. We did kind of convince them to try this out, and we entered into the memorandum of understanding with the CEO November of 2018. As mentioned, the Colorado Energy Office has previously kind of vetted and competitively procured a number of ESCOs. We at the time, for transparency's sake, decided to further compete those. So we opened up an RFP for the investment grade audit portion. In April of 2019, I believe we received 6 responses, interviewed 3 folks, and ended up selecting McKinstry as our ESCO for the project. We got into contracts with them that July. They began their investment grade audit, which took us kind of through the end of that calendar year. We were kind of working our way through some, pulling some parts and pieces out, modifying scope for a few of the schools, and then, as we all know, COVID. So we kind of got halted there for a bit, but we were able to present our 90% design scope to our Board of Education December of 2020. And then just about a little over a month ago, we had our fully executed EPC contract and secured financing. This past May, we are beginning construction literally, I think 2 weeks from now here, mid-July, and looking to reach our substantial completion sometime this fall, maybe towards the end of the 2021 calendar year. The final project scope we landed on was full LED upgrades for interior and exterior at five of the 8 schools we looked at. There were just some functional issues at a handful of those schools where we decided that full fixture replacements was really the right approach, and that just didn't price out within the EPC model. So we kind of took those schools out. We're doing plumbing upgrades, internal plumbing upgrades at 8 elementary schools. This is kind of pulling out the guts of our existing kind of high flow urinals and toilets and replacing those with high efficiency flush valves. We're doing smart energy meters at 7 of the 8 schools. One already had the meter installed. And then we did add in a rooftop solar array at one of our STEM schools. That kind of worked out nicely. We had won a large bond for our district that we've been going through the past kind of 5 years. And this school was almost a complete rebuild and therefore had a fully kind of new roof everywhere, upgraded transformers and switchgear and everything. And it was an easy fit to get, I think it's going to be about an 80% offset for that school. And then McKinstry has an active energy management program that we'll be doing at all the schools. And this is kind of like a commissioning approach along with a little bit of engagement of our students around energy and water conservation. So, primary EPC advantage for folks to consider is that it is self-funding. So there's, here's sort of the numbers for our project. We ended up at just over $2 million, not including interest. This was the amount that we financed. The sort of average annual savings over that 15-year note is a little over $161,000, and the average annual payment during that time will be slightly less than that as per the guaranteed savings piece. We did secure a 2.216 interest rate, which is amazing. I tried to see if I could get my student loans added in there. I'm paying quite a bit more than that, but it didn't work out. So moving on, we're just over 15 years payback for the project. And then at the bottom there, you can see some savings. Really the great piece is that continued savings, continued kind of added cash flow from solar production, for the life of the solar once that note has been paid off. Some challenges for us, this is our first time going through this program. Obviously, it's been discussed. It's a fairly complex contract. Really having the Colorado Energy Office there and having that memorandum of understanding in place and access to those contracts, RFP templates, pricing templates, all these things that we hadn't put together before for this kind of project, really smoothed the road out for us. There was a point at which our internal legal counsel kind of reviewed all of those contract documents and kind of became another champion for this approach, given the quality of the program here in Colorado. He had done some EPC projects in another state and hadn't had, kind of left a bad taste in his mouth. But upon seeing sort of the language of the guarantee and the requirement of the measurement and verification and some of these other components, really thought that this was sufficiently de-risked for us to kind of continue forward with that. Another challenge, if you're an energy manager, projecting future electricity and water costs is, if you can do that real well, you can probably retire soon because it's hard. It's almost like you need a crystal ball, depending on weather, usage, rate increases. We have 6 water providers, 2 electricity providers. Things get complicated, and that's where that guaranteed savings piece is nice. Kind of independent of some of those fluctuations. If you have established your savings kind of projection appropriately, then you should be well protected. And for us, we ended up using a fairly low utility escalation rate. This is a common piece of that savings calculation. As we all know, utility costs go up over time, independent of usage. And we decided on a 2.7% escalation rate. I tend to model closer to a 3%. When I do my annual budget requests. We went on the low side just to be sure that, if things don't increase, as aggressively for one particular calendar year or fiscal year, we still do meet those savings. Obviously, once you get through all this contracting and financing and all these parts on the front end, at the end of the day, it's a construction project, right? There's typical construction project risks and unknowns as you get into your buildings. But that guaranteed max cost piece is nice. It's essentially a not to exceed. Certainly there's a contingency built into the project. But again, if there was an error made on the part of the ESCO, whatever LED tubes they originally scoped aren't going to work, and the new product is going to cost more, that does not reflect upon, the total cost of the project. And similarly, as mentioned, if you price this out a year ago and the cost of LED goes down another 3, 4, 5%, you do see those savings as the owner operator, which is nice. And then demonstrating those long-term utility savings certainly could be difficult, akin to projecting the electricity and water costs. How do you sort of demonstrate this out into the future and ensure that your operating budget is structured each year to be able to make that note payment and also, pay for all of your utility bills? And really, again, this 3 years of measurement and verification that are required for the Colorado Energy Office program are going to set us up to be able to do that. So it's not just me saying, oh yeah, everything's great, guys, we're good to go. But it's vetted and approved by multiple entities to sort of demonstrate, yeah, here's where the savings are happening, and this is how you can kind of show those in your books. So a few lessons learned. Start early, as I showed on the path there. We're more than 3 years into this. COVID certainly did not help, and I would say I wouldn't anticipate that level of time frame necessarily. It sort of depends on your organization. Just be patient if you're ready to take this on. As Dale mentioned very accurately, this is probably a new process for a bunch of folks in your organization. And so having them at the table early is very important. I kind of took the approach of, well, let's get a clearly defined project with real numbers and then bring it to them. And that, that backfired to some degree. There was a lot of sort of repeated meetings in a way to sort of, re-explain the idea. And some of that honestly was due to turnover as well. We've had new procurement managers, we've had new folks in our construction group during this 3-year process. So some of that is just going to kind of happen. And then, one thing to understand is the cost is going to be higher than a standalone project. As was mentioned previously, if you had all the money and all the manpower, to do this work internally, do it that way. It will be cheaper, right? Your guys are going to be able to get those lighting products that they already know and use the rebates and all the things that they do normally. Obviously, if you're here listening to this presentation, you may not have all the money you need or the manpower you need. And so you might want to go the route of a EPC and just kind of be prepared for that on the front end. I try to think of this as akin to, going out for a bond. There's a lot of work necessary to prepare and promote and advertise that bond and win it. And then there's issues around financing the bond and things that add cost to the overall price of just that construction work. And the EPC process kind of falls in that range as some of those added components, such as the investment grade audit and the measurement and verification, do have a cost, but also are crucial in validating kind of the project as a whole. So that's kind of the story for us. I'm happy to open it up to questions. Stop sharing here.
All right, thanks so much. So it looks like we've got a few questions on here for our speakers here. I think a couple, I want to just quickly start here with a couple questions maybe for Colorado, for the Energy Office on their program. Just taking it back to the beginning a little bit here, what should, if I'm a building owner and I kind of want to think about getting started with performance contracting here, what should my first step be if I want to learn more about Colorado's performance contracting program and if that program is a good fit for my organization's needs?
I can take that one. Thanks, Sam. So Dale had that resource page on the end of his presentation that we'll provide. As a first step, you can always check our website, but honestly, we would recommend to just reach out directly to myself or Jock. We're happy to get on the phone with you, go through a presentation on what it really means to go through our program. Dale obviously provided that overview and touched on the importance of getting as many of your different organizational aspects bought into this project. So something that we often do on the early end is also talk directly with our clients, with their board, in order to get everyone educated on the process and what they're getting into. So best step would probably just to be engaged early directly with our office, and we'll dedicate time and resources to help you through the process.
Great. So I guess that definitely kind of helps me out here with thinking through kind of the beginning stages of the process. But and obviously we think through as energy saving, as performance contracting as a way to get a lot of efficiency improvements. But can performance contracting also be used for fulfilling renewable energy goals? I think another question here on this was, one of our attendees said his clients want to add solar panels and battery storage as an additional measure. Is this allowable?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can take this one. Shannon mentioned in their project they had some solar PV included, and it's becoming more and more common that we see those measures get included into EPC projects, actually as a driver of savings in order to broaden the scope of the overall project. So, including measures like solar PV or even battery storage, as I think Thomas asked about earlier, can actually help to expand the scope of the project in some cases if it's paired up with some creative utility rebate schedules or some creative rate structures that can be also brought into the project with those renewable opportunities. So it's definitely a way to get to those renewable procurement goals and as well as getting those energy reduction goals taken care of while bringing down your utility bills.
That's great. Thank you, guys. So I guess thinking about the utility bills here aspect of it, what if you're in a small county or a school or a smaller school district or a smaller municipal government that has relatively low utility spend or utility bills? Can performance contracting still be a good fit for what I'd be looking to do here?
Yeah, great question. I'll start this one off, and Jock, feel free to add in if you'd like. So, one thing that this question is getting to is, when we think of the most traditional concept of an energy performance contracting project, the example that Shannon's project was able to do for Adams 12 5-star schools is a fully self-funding project. And that means that your baseline or your current utility spend really sets the bar for the maximum amount of savings that you could leverage into an EPC project by reducing that spend. And that closely ties with another aspect that Dale covered, is the inclusion of third-party financiers to actually finance these projects. One thing we do see is that depending on who you work with on that financing side, in the state of Colorado, we work directly with banks, credit unions, financial institutes, a wide range, and they all have different targets for what they're looking for a project. Some of those really large national banks might not be interested in financing a project that is under $1 million or $2 million. And relating that to the baseline utility spend is, if you're, Colorado, our program works in all 4 corners of the state. And, as we're probably aware, some of the counties in Colorado, there's 64 counties, have 5,000 or less population in the whole county. And what that results in is relatively low utility spend. And that could mean that to actually retrofit your facilities, you might not have a ton. You might be looking at a lighting project and other things that only cost $200,000, $400,000. That doesn't preclude you from going through our program. In that case, we do more direct outreach to local banks and credit unions, because they have that, they do focus on that smaller market of projects, potentially $500,000 or less. And then the other thing to mention is that for those smaller projects that don't have a ton of utility spend, more and more we leverage state grants to help grow the size of those projects. So while the concept typically is funding these projects through energy savings, we can also infuse other capital into these projects to grow the size of those projects. One agency I'll mention is Department of Local Affairs. We partner with them very closely and have been very successful in our projects in incorporating grant funds into those projects to both help those projects with low energy savings cash flow and meet statute by buying down the amount of funds that need to be financed, as well as helping just grow that project size to something that is more attractive to the private market, both from the ESCO and financing perspective, and create larger projects. So, even if you're a small local government, energy performance contracting can still be a solution for you to help meet your needs.
And one other thing that I'll just jump in and add there, it doesn't necessarily pertain to this question, but the previous one, those grants that Dylan mentioned that we're seeing get rolled into these projects more and more, they can also serve as a means to roll in more innovative measures that might not in the traditional sense cash flow for an EPC project. So we've seen certain electrification measures, battery storage that has a little bit higher price tag that doesn't necessarily have the savings to back it up so that it brings that positive cash flow that's required project-wide by statute. So those grants can also be another means to buy down that initial project cost and make sure that it's in compliance with statute. Because like Dale said, first and foremost, that's a very, very important aspect of these projects. So just wanted to mention that as well.
Thanks, Jack. I think going back for a second here, thinking about some of those third-party financiers that get brought in for the process here, we do have another question in the question and answer box asking about, can you prepay for the ESC analysis and then maybe self-fund the project? Wouldn't that save the building and financing costs?
Yeah, great question. So that is an option. We're really flexible with where that money comes from at the end of the day. So the most common one is that municipal lease or tax exempt lease purchase. That's the most common financing mechanism we see. We also see bond financing. We see grant funds, as we've mentioned, and we do see projects that are fully funded from capital contributions from the client. We do have some political subdivisions in Colorado who have done multiple phases of projects through our program. Even though they have the money available, they're paying cash to fund these projects, but they like our program because of the single source procurement contract, which allows them to select one ESCO to really hold their hand throughout the whole process. They like having access to our state approved standardized model contracts. And then they like having access to us at the Energy Office to provide that third-party oversight and engineering and contracting support. So we do see clients in Colorado who still want to go through the program, even though they might end up self-funding that project at the end.
Yeah, I would just add, as a school district, we kind of approached it like that initially. We had encumbered through capital funds the investment grade audit costs up front. In case it wasn't clearly mentioned, there's basically the two separate contracts within the program. There's the investment grade audit contract that results in the investment grade audit report and a energy performance contract proposal. And then there's a separate contract you enter to actually do the EPC. And if we as an entity had decided we didn't want to move forward, we could simply exit the contract at that point and pay for the investment grade audit. So we kind of had ourselves prepared to do that in the event we didn't find a project we liked or whatever.
Great. And I think one more question I have here for Colorado specifically is, if you're an organization that has pretty strict procurement protocols that, require competitive bids and public notices of work, how would this kind of work with the EPC process in Colorado?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. So it's a common question that we get at the beginning of the process. Since we do have our list of pre-qualified ESCOs, there's commonly concerns that picking from a pre-qualified list won't actually meet those procurement requirements that will differ from political subdivision to political subdivision. But generally, our philosophy within the EPC program here in Colorado is that we want to make sure that we are conforming to whatever subdivision we're working with's policies are. So within that, our procurement process, or the procurement process that's supported, if it needs to be competitive, then that's why we have our 5-year contract renewal with our 13 pre-qualified ESCOs. So every 5 years, there is a competitive procurement for that pre-qualified list. And that 5-year contract has an annual option to renew, which is how we vet the ESCOs initially and then make sure that they're meeting programmatic requirements on an annual basis, which stipulates their ability to renew their annual contract option throughout that 5-year base contract. Dylan, do you have anything that you might add in there?
Yeah, I'll just add that then, if it comes to, what we sometimes term the secondary selection of which of those pre-qualified ESCOs do you select to work with. Shannon mentioned they did do a competitive solicitation. We recommend maybe release that, or through our office, we offer an RFP toolkit. We offer guide process and guidelines. We offer scoring template. We offer, sample interview questions. So we'll help you go through an RFP. It's up to you to decide, do you release it to all 13 pre-qualified ESCOs? Do you down select that? Shannon mentioned that they got 6 respondents, and then from that, they selected 3 to do an interview stage. And then at that point, our office typically sits in on those interviews. We're not scoring, we remain impartial. And then the political subdivision makes their final choice on which of those ESCOs they want to move forward with.
Yep. And one more addition, we've also seen, concerns over subcontract work as well. We're willing to work with that as well with whichever ESCO you do select. There can be a notice of work that's released through the ESCO for those subcontract selections, as well as, looking at in your geographic region, looking for local subcontractors that can help stimulate that local economy through this EPC project as well, since many of the political subdivisions that we work with do have that interest as well.
All right, so I think I want to change tacks here for the rest of the couple more minutes here and just kind of ask, I want to ask Shannon a couple questions here just about your case studies. Thinking about all the steps you went through and all of the things you did as part of this performance contracting process, what factor or subject were you most unprepared for in taking on taking on performance contracting?
Yeah, I think in hindsight, probably the idea that it is a financial mechanism. At the end of the day, I'm a scientist, I come out of energy management. So a lot of the financing type components and verbiage and, tax exempt lease purchase and what is a lien and do we own these were things I did not have any experience with, even recognizing from the get-go, yeah, it is a financial tool. I kind of was in this space of, well, the tool is that you're paying for the work with the savings. But how do you get there is certainly much more complex for a public entity than simply, one hand washing the other. So that I had to get my learn on for sure.
Great. And we have time for one more quick question. So I guess, how did you anticipate leveraging the economic prospect of your performance contracting project into future work? And then I guess also, what's just your favorite facility improvement coming out of the project?
Yeah. So we're already, talking internally about how we could potentially utilize this model again. Certainly the kind of go-to process for school districts is to go out for a bond every handful of years. We just had a big one, $350 million, tons of deferred maintenance, as Dale mentioned. Not a lot of energy efficiency improvements because there's a lot of roofs, a lot of sewage, things that don't necessarily pay for themselves. So we're kind of right now on the fence of, all right, are we going out for another bond? Or if not, can we then kind of revisit this model for some of our other facilities? And perhaps even, funds part of that through some of this American Recovery Act money or other funds that are becoming available. So hopefully that conversation continues. And then the favorite improvement is definitely the solar array. It's going out one of our STEM schools. They're going to be able to see its production real time on their smart energy meter. Like I said, I think it's about 80% offset for the building, which will be our closest to a net zero school for the district. And we have one other school with a kind of a small array on it, but this is really our first project in kind of recent time and utilizing some of these new rate structures that are available to really investigate, can we go bigger with solar? So I'm pretty pumped for that.
Great. So we are at 2:30 p.m. So we do have to conclude our training for today. So first, a big thank you to all of you once again for participating in this training. Really glad you could all join us. And it's really great to have Dylan and Jock and Shannon all on this call. Dylan and Jock are going to be great resources for you at the Colorado Energy Office should you have an interest and want to pursue performance contracting in order to help finance energy efficiency improvements on your buildings. So please, please give them a contact. They're happy to help you out. So on behalf of all of us here, NASIO and ESC and Colorado Energy Office and Adams School District, I just want to say, well, once again, thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your summer. And happy 4th.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.